Hello, good evening, and a break with tradition. It's Friday night, and I will make a video tomorrow, which will be my Saturday video. But really, I just wanted to make a quick video because of the whole controversy that's been going on this week about this Panorama program about private ADHD diagnosis and the whole kind of thing of is it real and is there too much diagnosis, etc. And I watched half the program and I just switched it off because oh, I found it really hard because I was tired when I watched it, and there's a whole bit of my brain that constantly tells me that ADHD is not real, that I'm just weak, that I could just work more to be normal, all of those things, that I can just outthink it, that I'm making a fuss about nothing, that things aren't that bad. Um, and I suppose that I felt that the 15 minutes that I watched kind of bought into that really in a way because it sort of said anyone can get an ADHD diagnosis. And then this idea of the real psychiatrist then telling this guy that he didn't have ADHD. Anyway, I just want to share my experience because I think it's really important that those of us who have had a good experience of going for a private diagnosis make it very clear that that is possible. So, what happened with me? I have struggled all my life. Classic ADHD symptoms in women. I, I mean, I have a brain that is very fast functioning. That I'm very physically hyperactive. I always have been. I I absolutely know what I need to do, and then I can't do it. I've got this disconnect between bits of my brain. My brain just doesn't function quite the way it should. I've done incredibly well in terms of career. I went to Cambridge University. I have had a very successful career in education. By all accounts, I'm a very good teacher, probably a reasonably good school leader, although I'm not sure it's possible to be that. Um, no, that's a stupid thing to say. I am a reasonably successful school leader. I suffer chronically from self doubt. So everything I do, even saying those things that I've just said, I can feel inside this panic. But that's what I've lived with my whole life. Um, Chronic self doubt, chronic rejection sensitive dysphoria. So I take everything really personally, which means that doing all the successful things and putting the front on takes a lot more work than perhaps it does for other people. So I do have very classic symptoms, but I didn't know I had ADHD. I was, I had some trauma in my early childhood, and also there's some intergenerational trauma that's been passed on. Both my parents were Second World War babies, so there's a lot of stuff, and I just kind of assumed, I think, that I was just creative and a bit mad and a bit, whatever. But then I worked and did therapy and had an eating disorder and never really seemed to feel better from therapy or anything in the way that other people did. That thing of like you have therapy and then you move on. And then went through a really difficult time a couple of years ago with work, I think perimenopause, all those things. Had done loads of therapy, loads of trauma stuff. And then a very good psychologist friend of mine said, right, you've done all of that. I think maybe you need to look at ADHD. Um, and I was kind of like, oh, you think? And then I'd had this thing, I think, that I knew, and I've worked in special educational needs and additional support needs for my whole career as well. So I've worked with children with ADHD, and it's almost that thing of like I just couldn't see it in front of my eyes. And anyway, once I'd come to the conclusion, because I've got ADHD and I'm really impatient, I was like, went to the GP, and they just said, "Yeah, we'll put you on a list." And for someone like me, that was like, well, this is desperate and I need help now. And it was desperate. I was finding stuff really hard. Um, so then I um, read about Adrian Childs, the TV presenter, and I just thought, wow, he went privately. And I looked and found out that there's an organisation called Psychiatry UK. I did a lot of research. I looked carefully into their kind of testimonials. I spoke with them, and I felt that they were ethically very sound. And I hate the idea of going privately. I don't believe in privateness, but and I was lucky to have the money, and I was also lucky that I knew a lot about ADHD, so I was able to do all the preparation, answer the questions. Although the weird thing was, there was things that I was like, wow, I've never noticed that about myself. And then my husband had to fill in a questionnaire as well, and he actually didn't want to show it to me because he said there's things about you that actually I realised I've never really noticed before, but actually they're really extreme, like losing my keys and just things. So anyway, then I think it maybe took about 3 weeks to get an appointment at that point, and that was in 2019. No, 2020 going into 21 possibly. Um, yeah, that's right, end of 2020. And that was just, I think, after the pandemic, and I think that was when uh, people seeking diagnosis through these organisations was just going up, and I think I got in at the last minute, so I was very, very lucky. I notice now their waiting lists are huge, and I had an appointment, and it was at something like 10 at night, because that's what suited me, and I saw the most fantastic psychiatrist, um, called um, I can't remember his name. I could find it, and I I'd sent in all my paperwork beforehand, and we had a consultation that probably was less than an hour. But I knew instinctively that he got me. He was very experienced in women with trauma, in women's mental health. He was very interested in women not being diagnosed as bipolar or mad. Um, he was absolutely brilliant, and he diagnosed me. And it wasn't a eureka moment. It didn't change my life. I have I was then titrated for medication, which has been a rocky journey, and that was amazing as well. There was I got a nurse who then titrated, so I was sent medication actually through the post, and then started on a very low dose and built it up, and they monitored blood pressure, and all sorts, and it's very carefully done. I then paid for medication for I think about 6 months, and then it was then shared care, so it was then accepted as a diagnosis by my GP, and since that, it's all been handled through my GP. And I have had no interaction with anyone about my ADHD, no specialist, because in this area where I live, there is very limited resource, and so and because of who I am, I do a lot of thinking and researching myself. But yeah, I don't know what I'd have done actually if that hadn't happened at that time. And it's been a huge learning journey, and I'd love to say yes, everything's now fine. Everything's still really, really difficult, and that's the whole point. But knowing it's ADHD is massive, and knowing that it's not really my fault, that it's the way I am, and knowing that if I don't work with my brain and I don't accept this is how I am, then I will burn out, and that I will probably not live the long life that I could, because I will just overwork. And it doesn't mean I don't overwork, because I do, because I'm a head teacher and I massively overwork, but I have this now constant knowledge, and I have therapy once a week still. So that's my experience, and that is really different to that program. And um, I just think it's really important to say that, and to say that it is possible to go through that process. That said, I know now waiting lists are huge. I also know that anyone who doesn't have a couple of £1,000 sitting around wouldn't have been able to do what I did. What I actually did was, we didn't have a holiday that year. Um, and yeah, that wasn't much of a sacrifice, I suppose. But I think, yeah, I think I'm frustrated because actually my job now is to make other people understand that it's really helpful to know, it's really helpful to not deny these things. And if what this program does is sets us back and makes everyone go, yeah, well, everyone's a bit ADHD, and you could just get a diagnosis privately and you wouldn't really have it, and it's just frustrating. The psychiatrist who was the kind of NHS genuine psychiatrist on the program has since written an article in the Guardian, which is quite helpful, and talks about how real. And I read a bit in there and thought, yeah, that is me. But I don't know. I just don't know. I feel a kind of sadness, because I think that there's that whole thing, isn't there, about Yeah, there's all these people out there with ADHD and they're all running the world and running Google and running Apple. There's also a lot of people out there with ADHD that don't have jobs, that are living in poverty, that have, a line of ADHD in the family, and so it's parents and children all struggling. And it's I think it's frustrating to think that we're not acknowledging that by perhaps buying into a narrative that is just one side of the story. And the reality is, if the NHS was able to diagnose people and had the specialism as well, because that's the other thing. Dr. Hossein, that was his name. I think he absolutely knew his stuff. He was a specialist, and I think we don't have that specialism in the NHS in a lot of places. Um, we will do in some places, but I know of way too many people like me going and being told you're high functioning, you're holding down a job, you're fine, we haven't got time for you. We're going to deal with the really severe cases. And yeah, there we go, 10 minutes, 11 minutes. So I think that please know that it is possible to use the private system. Um, I wish we didn't have to. And I am working in my job that I do. I work with families, parents, children to try and make them understand that just by knowing how your brain works, and understanding it, it doesn't make the challenges go away, but it can make life a little bit easier. Um, yeah, so that's that. A bit of a random waffle. No one will probably watch it. And but I just felt the need to do it. So stay well, stay safe. There will be another normal random waffle tomorrow morning, about the more general stuff. Take care.